have with us Dr. T.R. Srinivasan, Regional Director, IGNOU Regional Center, Hyderabad. First of all, please tell us about the importance of learner support system in the distance education.
Dr. Sanjay, this learner support system has to be looked into on the analogy of consumer support system or customer support system. You know, there are different ways of looking at distance education. One way of looking at it as an industrialized form of education. There have been people like Otto Peters who thought distance education as an industry. And of course, they have given the reasons as to why they consider it as an industry. Large production on a large scale, and the product going through various units of specialization and ultimately distributed to people across a wide, large area. And when the product reaches the unit, just as in the case of the Maruti cars being produced at one place and then distributed through several distribution agencies, and then being taken care of local service agents all over the country. We need to see that the products given by the industry meet the requirement and the needs of the consumer who wants to use them. On the same analogy, in distance education, there are students who are opting for courses, and those courses are being produced centrally from one place and then distributed across a wide region.
How the learner support system at IGNOU is organized?
Well, see, when I say learner support system, the learner support may be from the beginning till the end. Say like at the time of registration, the learner may need some support. And when the registration is over, once the student get admitted, then he may need some support by way of getting the course material, getting the courseware and other things. And once the material reaches him, he may need support in terms of instructional delivery. And perhaps later he may need support in terms of certification. And then after certification is done, again the learner may need support in terms of post-qualification guidance. So that way, support is needed at different levels for different purposes. That way, I should say in IGNOU we have different divisions which cater to these support needs. We have the student registration and evaluation division, which takes care of registration as well as certification. And then we have the EMTC and the MPDD divisions, which take care of material production and material distribution. Similarly, we have a division called Regional Services Division, which caters to the individual needs of the students located at different places. And this Regional Service Division operates at 3 levels. The Regional Service Division is there at the headquarters, and we have what is known as regional centers, a network of regional centers across the country, and each regional center is supported by a number of study centers, program study centers, learner support centers, and work centers, and things of that kind at the lower level. So it's a kind of a 3-tier arrangement of support system for the individuals. Then if you take the actual support, the means of support, you have mediated support going to the learners and interpersonal support reaching the learners. When I say mediated support, it may be support given to the individual in terms of the tutor comments given on assignments, or it may be in terms of the correspondence that's being regularly held between a study center and the learner, or the regional center and the learner, or maybe from the schools with the learner. So like that, there could be a number of, apart from this, you can have teleconferences, interactive radio counseling, EduSat. There's so many other media which is being pressed into service for supporting the learners. When you come to the interpersonal support, we have what is known as a grievance cell at the regional centers, where the students can come and talk about their problems, get them resolved. Or you can have the regular counseling sessions at the study centers, where the students go for the purpose of tutorials and also for purpose of interaction with the other learners and the experts in the field. Like this, the support is organized at different levels for different purposes.
Now, at the study center level, these academic counselors are there who perform variety of roles, including tutoring, providing personal counseling, and also doing evaluating the assignment responses. And you hinted about the tutor comments. Can you highlight the importance of the tutor comments in the whole learning process?
Dr. Sanjay, one of the biggest complaints about the distance mode right from the early days has been that there is no provision for proper interaction between the learner and the teacher. So over the years, what began as correspondence education has evolved into a system where lots of provisions are now being made for interaction. Leaving aside the unrealistic time and interaction with a time gap. Today, with the advent of technology, even real-time interaction has been made possible. Now, though IGNOU has not exactly gone to that extent of providing a real-time interaction with everyone for all possible purposes, we do try to give interaction, provide interaction through the assignments. And here the advantage is the interaction, unlike in other cases, happens to be a kind of one-to-one interaction. I give a task and you respond to the task, and then I try to see how well you have performed on that task given to you. If there is something good, I tell you, look, you have done a wonderful job. In this respect, I appreciate what you have done. If there is some lacuna somewhere, some drawback, some failure, then I say, look, Sanjay, probably you could have done this better if you had taken care of this. And then I go on giving additional support for improving. So that becomes a kind of a one-to-one interaction, which perhaps even is not possible in a regular face-to-face mode of education. All the time it's not possible.
The tutor comments are essentially a personalized tool of interaction with the students through the assignments responses of the students. What are the different types of these kind of comments that academic counselor can provide to the student?
See, ideally speaking, every comment that you give has to be a kind of teaching comment, a supportive comment. We have to, because we have been in the convention system for long, where we used to write certain things which are too negative, too, kind of hurting the ego of the individual, too much of an hurt of an individual's ego. Those kind of things like rubbish, unwanted, why do you waste my time? It's irrelevant. Now that kind of comment we have to carefully avoid, because this is a system where the students are isolated and they need our support. And if you say something adverse, something negative, where will the student go? So even the adverse comments have to be camouflaged, have to be sandwiched between comments of appreciation in such a way that no failure on the part of the learner is left unattended to. At the same time, you attend to it in such a way that without hurting the ego or the interest of the learner, you help him come out of that weakness. That's how we have to organize the comment. So that way, if you hurt them, if you provoke them to leave, to drop out of the course, then your comments become negative comments, they become non-teaching comments. So broadly speaking, you can have teaching comments and non-teaching comments. Teaching comments can be of a different kind. Traditionally speaking, starting with Professor B. and Cole, they have talked about different types of comments like harmful comments, hollow comments, negative comments, null comments, misleading comments, and then of course positive comments and constructive comments, adding at the end something like personal comments. Now personal comments are a class apart, leaving aside the rest of the things, and among the rest of the things you can have the first few, the harmful comment, null comment, negative comment and misleading comment as non-teaching comments. The positive and constructive comments can be taken as teaching comments. Strictly speaking, I should say, we'll explain the null comment. People say that any non-verbal cues you put something like a question mark, or sometimes a question mark followed by an exclamation mark, sometimes a cross mark. People generally say that these are null comments because they don't communicate. But what I feel is, if you have an understanding with your learner, because any communication depends on a kind of a mutually shared code, use of mutually shared codes. If the code that you use is mutually understandable, if the learner knows what I mean when I put a question mark, then that ceases to be a null comment. Even that can be taken as a teaching comment. So like that, ultimate purpose of the comment is to communicate. If your communication is achieved, if the communication is successful, then you say that your comment is also good.
The comments that an academic counselor is expected to make in the assignment response, they are essentially the use of effective use of language to me. What role does language play in writing tutor comments?
Sanjay, I think that's a very valid question, because the entire tutor comments has to use the media of language. Through the medium of language only, we pass on our responses or comments to the learners. Now, generally we say that the language you use has to be conversational in nature. But what makes a conversation? when does something become conversation? That's a major question. I mean, it's not just using pronouns like you and I alone contribute to making a piece of a string of words into a conversation. Conversation has its own features. In fact, I should even say it's a kind of a grammar. I mean, it's a kind of a distinct grammar which governs your speech, very much different from the grammar that governs your writing. All your days in school and colleges, we have been taught only about the written grammar, the syntactical grammar or the structural related grammar. How should a sentence be constructed? How sentences should be linked to one another? So this kind of training we have been given when we were taught grammar in schools and colleges. When you in tutor comments, what we do is not giving a written language. It is writing a spoken language. Now that's the kind of an oxymoron. You write, but what you write has to turn out to be a speech. Now that's where the difficulty arises. You have to visualize the whole communication in the form of a speech, but that spoken form of communication has to be delivered in a written form. The crux of the whole issue lies in that. Now, unless somebody knows the grammar of speech, he won't be able to follow this. See, I can give you an example. The written form will have a full-fledged sentence. If it may start with a subject, it may be followed by a predicate or object or whatever it is. But when you speak, it is not governed by this kind of sentence structure. It is governed more by the thought content, the idea processing. You say something, then immediately I react to that idea. So it's governed more by an idea rather than by the structure of the sentence. So that's what I mean. Linguistically, we call it paratactic grammar as against syntactic grammar. And this paratactic grammar follows different norms, different rules, different procedures. The immediate concern would be the idea and linking your response to the idea expressed by the other person.
This takes to a very different turn of events, because the academic counselors in the distance education system are drawn from the conventional system, and therefore they probably need a different kind of training to handle the new kind of roles they would be performing. What specific areas and skills that you think the academic counselors should be trained?
So any training for that matter has two broad areas, because when you say training, you are dealing with a skill. Obviously, writing tutor comments is a skill. If you want to train people in this skill, then you have to first provide them the related information. The related knowledge has to be passed on. Passing on the information, transmitting the information can be done through a number of means, either by print material or other material. But transmitting or imparting skill is something totally different, which has to follow different process. And that too, when you are using a new medium, a new form of language, people have to get acquainted with this new form of language, and they have to become expert in the use of this kind of form of language. One basic thing would be providing them as many examples as possible of tutor comments, and tutor comments not in isolation but in the context, because every tutor comment that you give is related to a given context. So in context, examples have to be provided, and then the trainees will have to work through these samples, keeping in mind the overall context in which the comments have been given. So on the one side you have the medium, on the other side you have the context, on the third side you have the function, the pedagogical functions, which you are supposed to carry out using this medium given the context.
Given your experience in the field, and of course your own research on tutor comments and working with the academic counselors in that context, what kind of challenges you see the academic counselors face at one hand, and the other, the distance education system as a whole face the challenge to meet the effective learner support system?
I think I should say the greatest challenge for distance education is the number. On the one side, we say that the scale of economies allow us to deliver instruction to a large number of people with limited resources. But this large number cannot be expanded without any concern, without any restriction. Because for anything, there is a kind of a critical point. Beyond the critical point, the number becomes a hurdle. We have to identify the correct number up to which we can enjoy the benefits of the scale of economies to the maximum advantage, to the optimal level. We should restrict the number going beyond that. So that number, if restricted, then probably the other things like training, practicing, monitoring, all these things will become easy, will fall within the controllable, manageable limit. Now the problem we face now is that the number has grown somewhat unwieldy, somewhat unmanageable. Number not only in terms of the students, in terms of the programs that we offer, in terms of the courses we offer, in terms of the multiplicity of the assignments that we give, and then in terms of multiplicity of the tutors or the academic counselors that we have to train and handle. So all this complex multiplicity of number has turned the issue into a big problem, with the result effective monitoring has become a question.
The kind of task the academic counselors are expected to perform is looks like to be a kind of a stressful job. And from your experience, how do you see that the academic counselors react to the expectation of the Open University?
See, basically the question is one of commitment. I mean, I should say, happy to say that in spite of all hardships and other things, there are still teachers who are committed to the job. But these are very few in number. These few committed teachers take the job to their heart, and they try to do the maximum that's possible. But it is these teachers who are put to maximum stress. They want to do a good job, they want to give comments elaborately on the assignment responses, but they need more time to do this. They don't get enough time to do full justice to all the assignments they receive. But these people are very few in number, and they are outnumbered by the other group in such a large manner that the overall result is not that appreciable. Therefore, what we need to do is to develop a kind of a pressure group who turn into more and more committed people towards this job, who spend more of their time in delivering goods to the learners. That kind of, we need to take efforts towards developing this kind of a pressure group who can, people with similar mind, people with similar intention can join together and develop a kind of a model for others to follow.
What kind of strategies that you think that we should take to bring this large number of people to the mainstream of the distance education, so that the learner support system could be more effective? Apart from training is one of the strategy that we can do.
No, it's purely basically it's a question of conviction. More and more people need to be convinced that this system is going to stand. This system is going to be the order of the day, maybe after 5 years or 10 years, because we can't afford to be we can't have to have single mode institutions across the country for a long time to come. And now the students would be interested to remain confined to the institution, and nor can we afford to have more and more students for a longer period in our institutions. So maybe in another 5 years or 10 years we may have mostly dual mode institutions, or it's also possible that the electronic media may overtake this kind of face-to-face instruction. We have to gear up, we have to equip ourselves. When I say we, the entire teaching community has to gear up to meet that kind of eventuality. Now this has to be brought to the notice of the teaching community so that they also take interest, because it's a question of survival for them. If they don't get equipped to meet the developments that are likely to happen, which are around the corner, then they will be losing their job. They can't continue to work with yesterday's tool forever. They have to adopt the new tools which are coming up. So that kind of message has to be sent across to the teaching community, teaching fraternity, and then we have to tell them that this is not anything difficult. All that's required is a kind of a concern for the learner, concern for learning. In fact, I remember sometime back when I was in Port Blair, we were taken around the garden which was maintained by the state government there. A gardener took us around, and when we were about to leave, he gave us a few saplings. Then we had a question, sir, these saplings have come up well here, maybe because of the climate and because of the surrounding here. Will the same saplings have the same kind of growth when we take back to the mainland? The gardener said, don't worry, sir, you don't have to do anything. All that's required is a little bit of water, a little bit of manure, and plenty of concern. If you have that concern, these plants will grow. I think the same thing is needed for teachers. If they have concern for their learners, all other things will fall in place.
Right. Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your views with you.
Okay.
We are
Thank you.
privileged. Thank you.